On the night the wind smelled like wet iron, Noah Raines counted coins by the kitchen sink and tried not to listen to the wheeze in Aunt Sable's lungs. The apartment had 2 rooms, 1 window, and a radiator that clicked like a nervous tongue. Sable sat in the armchair with a blanket wrapped tight, pretending the oxygen concentrator was just another household appliance, like a fan or a kettle, something ordinary that didn't deserve fear. "Don't make that face," she said, voice thin but stubborn. "You look like you're about to bargain with the sky." Noah slid the coins into stacks anyway, because bargaining was all she had ever learned. A clinic pamphlet lay open on the table, its cheerful photos of smiling nurses at war with the reality of their lives. On the last page, in a neat font that felt like a verdict, the deposit for the procedure sat like a boulder, $12,600 due in 10 days. Sable's fingers, spotted with age, tapped the armrest. "We can wait," she lied. "I've waited my whole life for worse things." Noah shook her head. She had been found at 14 behind a bus terminal with a backpack that held nothing but a broken phone and a school ID that wasn't hers. Sable had taken her home with the same matter-of-fact kindness she used for stray cats and lost umbrellas. Noah had survived because someone finally said, "Without conditions, you can stay." Now she wasn't going to watch that someone vanish because of a number printed in ink. Aurora Glassworks sat at the edge of Harbor 9, where the city's bright billboards gave up and the warehouses started. By daylight, it looked almost harmless. A rectangle of corrugated metal with a painted logo of a rising sun. Inside, it was a kingdom of noise. Conveyors rattled, bottles clinked like frantic bells, and the rotary pulverizer growled behind a safety cage as if it hated everything it touched. Noah worked the sort line in thick gloves, pulling out caps and stray plastic, breathing dust that tasted faintly of old soda and sand. It wasn't romantic work, but it was steady. And steady meant rent, groceries, and the slow construction of a future. When the supervisor called for volunteers to cover the maintenance shift, the room changed. People looked away the way they did when a street performer asked for donations. The maintenance shift was paid double because it came with a waiver and a warning. The pulverizer had to be opened, cleaned, and reset while the rest of the plant slept. It was meant for older technicians, not for a 19-year-old with rent overdue and a sick woman at home. The supervisor's eyes landed on Noah, then slid past her like he wanted to pretend she didn't exist. Noah raised her hand anyway. "I can do it," she said, forcing her voice to sound like it belonged to someone who didn't tremble. The supervisor frowned. "It's not a hero job." "I'm not trying to be a hero," she replied. "I'm trying to be employed." The pulverizer's kill switch was bright red, a color too cheerful for what it controlled. Noah repeated the steps in her head the way she repeated bus routes. Lockout, tagout, verify zero energy, open panel, check teeth, clear glass, reseat belts. The technician assigned to watch her, a tired man named Darnell, moved like he was wading through molasses. "Keep your hands where I can see them," he muttered, not unkindly. "This thing doesn't forgive." The work took hours. Her shoulders burned. Her wrists ached. At 3 a.m, when the factory air felt thick enough to chew, a jammed shard caught in the teeth and refused to budge. Darnell swore and went to fetch a tool. Noah stared at the shard, then at the clock, then at the deposit number in her mind, and she made a choice that she would later argue with in nightmares. She reached in, not to be reckless, but because she thought she could be careful. The machine was off, tagged, silent. Careful should have been enough. It wasn't. A backup hydraulic line, poorly bled, snapped pressure like a bite. The panel kicked. The teeth jerked a fraction. Glass shifted. Pain arrived as a white door slamming. She didn't lose fingers, but the crush pinned her glove and ground her palm hard against metal. When she screamed, the sound was swallowed by the building and returned to her thin and distant. Darnell came running, and the safety team, and then, in the chaos, a woman in a crisp coat appeared like a storm given human shape. Kiko Watan, the founder of Aurora Glassworks, was not tall, but she held the air around her the way an anchor holds seaweed. She listened to the report with a face that refused excuses. "Show me," she demanded. They took her to the bay, to the tagged switch, to the snapped line. She pointed at the maintenance log with one sharp fingernail. "This was signed," she said, and it was false. In the clinic, while Noah's hand was wrapped and her vision swam with painkillers, Keiko sat in the chair beside the bed, as if she had decided the chair belonged to her. "How much?" she asked, voice low. "Did you think risking your hand was worth?" Noah's throat tightened. She did not want to say the number, because saying it felt like admitting that she had priced her own body. Keiko waited anyway. Silent pressure. Noah whispered it. 12,600. Keiko exhaled once, then stood. My lawyer will bring documents, she said. We will cover your wages during recovery, and the company will pay damages. Noah's stomach flipped. She pictured Sable's hands, arthritic and tender, trying to pay rent with a jar of coins. She pictured Keiko's office with its clean lines and expensive glass art. It felt wrong to accept the distance between them as if it were a bridge. I don't want damages, Noah said quickly. I just need... Keiko cut her off. Need does not cancel harm, she said. Take what is owed, then decide what you'll do with it. The first check arrived 2 days later, and it was an amount that made Noah's pulse stutter. It could have paid for the deposit and then some. It could have replaced their wheezing radiator, fixed the cracked tile, bought Sable a bed that didn't sag. It could have rewritten the story of their small life. Noah stared at the numbers until they blurred. Then she did the strangest thing she had ever done. She went to Keiko's office and asked to return most of it. Keiko's assistant, a young man with perfect hair and an expression that suggested he had never seen hunger up close, looked scandalized. Keiko herself listened without interrupting, her dark eyes steady. Noah placed an envelope on the desk. I only need the deposit, Noah said, forcing herself not to flinch at the implication that she was bargaining. The rest feels like stealing. Keiko leaned back, the chair creaking softly. You were injured because we failed, she said. Compensation is not charity, and it's not theft. Noah pressed her palms to her jeans, hiding the bandaged hand. Then let me do this one thing clean, she said. Let me take the exact amount that keeps Sable alive. Keiko studied her for a long minute that felt like standing under a light too bright. Finally, she nodded once. If you insist, she said, but do not confuse pride with morality. Noah left the building shaking. Not from fear, but from the strange weight of kindness that insisted on being heavy. Sable's procedure happened on a Tuesday, the kind of day the world usually ignores. Noah sat in the waiting room with vending machine coffee and watched the clock hands scrape forward. When the surgeon finally came out, his smile was careful, like it had been trained not to promise too much. The procedure went well, he said, then added. Recovery will be demanding. Demanding meant follow-up visits, medication, physical therapy, and a home that could be kept warm. Noah nodded and swallowed the urge to beg for miracles. For a few weeks, things almost felt like a different life. Sable could breathe without looking like she was climbing a mountain. She made soup and scolded Noah for hovering. She even laughed at a silly game show, the sound sudden and bright. Then, as winter settled into the city with its damp cruelty, Sable's strength began to leak away. Not in one dramatic collapse, but in dozens of quiet surrenders. Fewer steps taken, meals left unfinished, naps that lasted too long. The doctor used words like complication and progression, and Noah learned that medicine could be both precise and helpless. The night Sable died, the power went out for an hour. The oxygen machine clicked and went silent. Noah held Sable's hand in the dark, counting breaths the way she once counted coins, bargaining with nothing. When the lights returned, Sable was still, her face soft as if she had finally forgiven the world for being hard. Noah's scream did not fill the room. It stayed inside her ribcage, folding into itself. Grief does not arrive as one feeling. It arrives as a committee. Guilt spoke first, because guilt always thinks it has jurisdiction. It told Noah she should have accepted more money, that she should have fought harder, that she should have been smarter, that her hand injury was both too much and not enough. Noah went back to Aurora with her palms still aching. Not because she needed the job anymore. Sable was gone, and rent felt suddenly pointless, but because routines were ropes. Keiko met her in the hall and did not offer condolences like a performance. She simply asked, "Do you have food?" Noah blinked. "Yes," she lied. Keiko gestured to a small break room where a thermos sat on the table, steam fogging the lid. "Soup," Keiko said. "Take it." The gesture should have been small, but it cracked something. Noah sat with the soup and cried silently until her shoulders hurt. She thought of how kindness could be unplanned and still land like a hand on your back, keeping you from falling. Weeks later, she stopped going to Aurora. She took work captioning training videos for a shipping company, then subtitling online courses, because it paid and because words on a screen felt easier than words in her own mouth. Her injured hand healed crookedly, and she learned to type with a splint and stubbornness. When she discovered that a simple caption could change a deaf viewer's day from exclusion to inclusion, she felt something like purpose lean into her life. 5 years passed in the way years do when you are not watching, one deadline at a time. Noah built a small business called Quiet Ledger, offering captions, transcripts, and accessibility consulting. She wore a thin compression glove that hid the worst of the scar, and she turned her habit of listening carefully into a skill. She recorded short videos about accessibility, about how silence could be both a barrier and a refuge. People followed her because she spoke without pity, and because she was honest about the messy math of survival. The day she saw Aurora Glassworks on the news, she was eating noodles over her laptop. The headline said, "Fire destroys recycling plant. Owner found dead." The screen showed a night sky bruised with smoke, flames licking the building's ribs. A reporter's voice explained that Keiko Watan had died, suddenly, and that her partner, a man named Rafi K, was unavailable for comment. The story slid into another clip. A teenage girl in a hoodie, eyes wide and dazed, being led toward a social services van. The caption identified her as Mika Watan, 14, placed into temporary care. Noah dropped her fork. The image of Mika's eyes startled, betrayed. Too young to be that tired hit Noah like a blow. She felt, with awful clarity, that the ledger between her and Keiko had not been closed. She had accepted a deposit and returned an envelope, and then she had let time pretend it was repayment. Now Keiko was ash, and a child had been left holding the smoke. Noah did not know Mika well. She had seen her once, years ago, in Aurora's lobby, chasing a paper airplane. Keiko had watched with a rare softness. "She hates my meetings," Keiko had said, almost amused. Noah had smiled back then, unaware of how memory could later turn into a hook. After the fire, Noah called every number she could find. Most rang into emptiness. The company line had been disconnected. Keiko's assistant had vanished from LinkedIn like a ghost. When Noah contacted social services, she was met with polite walls. "Are you family?" a tired caseworker asked. Noah hesitated, because the truth was complicated. "No," she admitted. "But I owe her mother," the caseworker sighed. "Owing isn't a legal category." Noah offered what she could. She paid for a trauma counselor willing to take Mika. She arranged for school supplies to be delivered. She left a note through the caseworker that said only, "If you ever need a safe adult, I will answer." She did not expect a response. She didn't deserve one. A month later, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. A girl's voice, guarded and sharp, asked, "Did you really work for my mom?" Noah sat down on the floor like her legs had decided for her. "Yes," she said, "and I'm sorry." Mika didn't cry. She asked questions like an investigator. Was her mother afraid of anyone? Did the plant have enemies? Why did the fire look like that? Why was the police report thin? Noah answered as best she could, and when she didn't know, she said so. At the end of the call, Mika whispered, almost inaudible, "They told me it was an accident." Noah stared at the wall. "Sometimes accident is a word people use," she said carefully, "when they don't want to say choice." The first threat arrived disguised as a compliment. A man with a large social media following, famous for reuniting families, messaged Noah publicly, "You look exactly like my client's lost daughter." He posted side-by-side photos Noah's face from a video and a blurred childhood picture of a girl with similar eyebrows. Within hours, strangers were in her comments calling her ungrateful, selfish, heartless. A rumor formed its own weather system. According to the rumor, Noah had abandoned her real parents, become rich, then refused to help her sick father. The reunion man framed it as moral entertainment. He would confront her on camera for the public's approval. Noah stared at the story spreading like oil and felt a familiar coldness. She had lived through being judged by people who never asked what hunger felt like. This time, she did not run. She collected receipts, documents, old clinic records, and the video from her building's security camera that showed the reunion man's crew pushing past her door. She called the police first, then went live on her own channel with a calm face and a voice that did not shake. "If someone wants to claim me," she said, "they can start by claiming the consequences of their choices." She showed the intrusion footage. She explained, briefly, that she had no birth family she recognized, and that no one had earned the right to use her life as a stage. She refused the cheap drama of a DNA test. "Even if we share blood," she said, Blood does not pay the rent of the past. The audience, hungry for certainty, found something steadier in her refusal to be baited. The reunion man's brand cracked under scrutiny. Other victims surfaced. The storm passed, leaving behind a sharper truth. Noah's visibility was both shield and target. After the online chaos, Noah expected her guilt to settle back into its usual quiet corner. Instead, it woke up angrier. Mika's questions echoed. Keiko's unblinking stare returned in dreams. The factory fire replayed in her head, as if she could catch the moment it changed from flame to fate. One evening, an old number appeared on her phone. Darnell, the maintenance technician, sounded older than he should have. "I shouldn't call," he said, "but you were the only one who ever looked at the machine like it mattered." Noah's stomach tightened. "What happened?" Darnell exhaled. Before the fire, there were meetings. Not the normal kind. Black cars, men with shiny shoes, paperwork that never went through the usual chain. He hesitated, as if the words cost him. Keiko was angry. She said someone wanted the land. Not the business, the land. Harbor expansion, new rail, fancy condos, whatever the city is dreaming this week. Noah's throat went dry. "Why didn't you tell the police?" "I did," he said bitterly. "They wrote it down, nodded, and then asked me if I'd been drinking." Darnell's voice dropped. Raffi tried to fight, then he disappeared. Noah remembered the newsline, unavailable for comment. "Where do you think he is?" Darnell laughed once, joyless. "Somewhere they can call help while it's really a cage." He gave her one more thing. The name of the security guard who had been at Aurora since the beginning, an old man named Lyle Penn, who knew every shift and every door. Lyle lived in a rented trailer behind a tire shop. He opened the door with the chain still latched, suspicion as thick as nicotine in the air. When Noah said her name, his eyes flickered. "You're the glove girl," he said. The one Keiko didn't hate, that made Noah's chest ache. Lyle let her in after checking the street twice. Inside, the trailer walls were covered with newspaper clippings and scribbled notes, as if he had been trying to build a bridge out of scraps. "They wanted her to sign," he said without preamble. "A sale." They came in smiling, talking about community and progress. Keiko told them progress shouldn't require theft. Lyle's hands shook as he poured 2 cups of instant coffee. After that, inspections started. Fines. Random shutdowns. A shipment lost at the port. A contractor offered to fix our wiring for cheap. He spat the last word like poison. Cheap fires burn expensive. Noah leaned forward. "Did you see the night of the fire?" Lyle's jaw tightened. "I saw the truck that shouldn't have been there. White utility van. No company markings. I wrote down a plate, but the paper went missing when I left it in the guardhouse." He looked at Noah, eyes wet with something like shame. "I'm not brave," he said. "I'm just old, and old men run out of places to hide." Noah touched the table with her scarred hand. "Bravery is not a personality," she said. "It's a decision that keeps happening." Lyle slid a folder toward her. "Keiko gave me copies," he whispered, "in case something happened. I didn't know something would happen this way." The folder held contracts, city council agendas, and a map with the Aurora land highlighted in red, like a wound. A development firm called Vale Meridian had been quietly acquiring adjacent lots, then petitioning for rezoning. The map made it obvious. Aurora was the missing tooth in their grin. A memo referenced Project Acceleration, and Noah felt her stomach twist at how clean the language was. She brought the folder to a lawyer who specialized in whistleblower cases, a woman named Drina Cho with a voice like sandpaper and a talent for seeing through nonsense. Drina skimmed the papers, then looked up. "This is enough to scare someone," she said. "Not enough to convict them." Noah's hands tightened into fists. "Then what do I do?" Drina leaned back. "You find the person who can connect intent to action," she said. "You find Raffi." The search for Raffi was a labyrinth of polite refusals and sealed records. Every hospital said they had no patient by that name. Every agency insisted privacy laws prevented disclosure. Noah hit walls until her forehead felt bruised. Then Mika called, voice brittle. "A woman visited my foster home," she said. "She wore a city badge. She asked if I remembered my mom acting unstable." Noah closed her eyes, rage rising like bile. "They're building a story," she said. "They're trying to make the missing people unreliable." Mika's breath hitched. "What do I do?" Noah heard Sable in her memory saying, Don't bargain with the sky. She thought instead, bargain with the ground. Build something solid. Stay safe, Noah said. Tell your caseworker you want everything in writing, and if anyone offers you money to say things, record it. Mika swallowed. I'm not a kid, she said fiercely. I know what a bribe looks like. Noah almost smiled, then remembered how unfair it was that Mika had to learn that so young. Noah found Rafi by following a trail that did not want to be followed. An offhand comment from a nurse about a rich man's charity wing. A billing code that appeared and vanished. A transport company that moved patients at odd hours. Drina pulled favors. Noah traded services. Lyle risked a former friend. The destination was not a hospital, but a private psychiatric facility outside the city, tucked behind trees like a secret. The sign outside said Willowgate Wellness Center in soft green letters that tried to soothe. Inside, the air smelled like disinfectant and resignation. Noah did not storm the gates. She wore a blazer, carried a clipboard, and spoke in the calm professional tone she used with corporate clients. She asked for a tour. She asked about accessibility. She asked the kind of questions that made administrators want to impress her. While they talked about holistic care, Noah watched the doors, the locks, the way staff avoided eye contact with certain rooms. She did not see Rafi that day. She saw the pattern of a place designed to remove inconvenient people from the world and call it treatment. Drina filed a formal request for records based on Mika's interest as next of kin, and the facility responded with paperwork so dense it felt like a wall of fog. Noah kept pushing anyway, because pushing was the only motion that kept her from sinking. A week later, a staff member called from a blocked number. Stop, the voice whispered. They're watching you. Noah's hands went cold. Who is this? Someone who doesn't want another fire, the voice said, and then the call died. The fear that followed was not cinematic, it was practical. Noah changed her route home. She installed more cameras. She asked a neighbor to keep an eye out for unfamiliar cars. She taught herself how to check her phone for tracking software, and she hated that she had to. At night, she dreamed of glass teeth and smoke. In the morning, she reminded herself that fear was information, not instruction. She decided to make the story public, but she refused to make it sloppy. Quiet Ledger had always been about clarity, words that helped people understand. She would treat the truth the same way. She partnered with 2 investigative journalists who had reputations for stubbornness, and she started a podcast series called The Harbor Ledger, focusing on labor, corruption, and the human cost of development. She did not name Vale Meridian in episode 1. She told the story of the plant. The workers, the safety violations, the inspections that arrived like punishment, the fire that erased evidence. She interviewed Darnell with his face hidden and his voice altered, not for drama but for survival. She interviewed Lyle and let his grief be plain. I watched a good woman get squeezed, Lyle said, and Noah felt the sentence land like a nail. The series spread, first among activists, then among bored office workers who loved a mystery, then among people who had once worked factories and recognized the smell of a rigged game. Attention became a tide. With attention came risk, but also leverage. Sponsors offered money. Noah refused the ones tied to real estate. Listeners sent tips. A former city clerk emailed an agenda that had been altered after a closed-door meeting. Another sent a photo of a Vale Meridian executive shaking hands with a fire inspector. The ledger grew thicker. When the podcast hit 1 million downloads, Vale Meridian responded in the way powerful people often do, with a smile and a lawsuit threat. A letter arrived accusing Noah of defamation and harm to community trust. The irony would have been funny if it weren't dangerous. Drina read the letter and snorted. They want you scared enough to shut up, she said. Don't. Noah's stomach churned anyway. She had never wanted a war. She had wanted a fair world. But fairness, she was learning, did not arrive by request. Mika, now living with a kinder foster family, called to say that someone had tried to approach her at school. They said they could help me move on, Mika said, voice flat. They said if I stopped talking to you, they'd pay for college. Noah closed her eyes, anger turning sharp. Did you accept anything? I told them to choke on their money, Mika said, and Noah felt a fierce pride that carried its own sadness. That night, Noah and Drina decided on a strategy that felt both reckless and precise. They would catch someone admitting what paper would never show. Vale Meridian's CEO, Garrick Vale, was hosting a charity gala for youth innovation at a downtown hotel. an event designed to paint him as benevolent. Noah could get in as accessibility consultant for the media team, providing live captions for the streamed speeches. It was a role that belonged to her, a disguise made of truth. She would be near him without raising alarms. She would listen, and she would record, not with spy movie gimmicks, but with the same tools she used every day: tiny microphones, redundant backups, timestamps, meticulous notes. If Garrick spoke like he believed himself untouchable, he might eventually say something that touched him back. The ballroom glittered with rented virtue. Crystal lights hung like frozen rain. Waiters moved with trays of champagne, smiling as if none of them had student debt. Noah wore a simple black dress and her compression glove, and she kept her expression calm enough to pass for another professional hired to make the rich look good. She sat at the captioning station near the stage, headphones on, eyes on her screen, while speakers praised Garrick for revitalizing the harbor. She typed calmly. Applause, laughter, inspiring anecdote, meaningless promise. During the break, Garrick stepped off stage and drifted into a side hallway with two men in suits and a woman with a city badge. Noah noticed because the woman's badge was the same kind Mika had described. Noah pretended to adjust her equipment, then followed at a distance, her phone in her palm recording audio through a mic no bigger than a button. She caught fragments, already rezoned. Push the last holdout. That girl and her podcast. Garrick's laugh was smooth. Let her talk, he said. Noise burns itself out. The woman with the badge lowered her voice. The missing partner is still a problem. Garrick's tone changed, impatient. He won't testify, he said. He's medicated, right? A pause. Then, make sure he stays unstable. Noah's stomach dropped. She felt the hallway tilt. She kept walking as if she were lost, then turned into a staff door and leaned against cool metal, breathing through the surge of adrenaline. The recording continued, catching Garrick saying, Keiko thought she could be righteous. And then, with casual cruelty, righteous people are flammable. Noah's hands shook so hard she almost dropped the phone. She forced herself to stop, to save the file, to upload it to 3 separate cloud accounts, because the first rule of evidence was redundancy. She did not confront Garrick. She returned to her station, captioned the rest of the event, and smiled when people thanked her for making their speeches accessible. The absurdity sat like acid in her throat. When she got home, Drina was waiting with 2 investigators from the state's anti-corruption unit, brought in quietly because the local channels were compromised. Noah played the recording. The room went still. The investigators exchanged looks that held both relief and dread. This is strong, one said. Not enough alone. Noah nodded. I know, she said. That's why we keep going. Over the next weeks, the pressure increased. A car followed her for 3 blocks, then vanished. Her landlord received anonymous complaints. A sponsor offered her a large contract with a clause that would have effectively muzzled her. She declined. The podcast continued, now with careful legal review, now naming Vale Meridian and tracing connections between city officials, inspectors, and developers. Listeners started showing up at council meetings, asking uncomfortable questions. The tide rose higher. The investigators moved with quiet urgency, collecting financial records, subpoenaing emails, interviewing former employees. Noah's job shifted from hunter to witness, and she discovered that witnessing was its own kind of endurance. One afternoon, Drina called with a piece of news that hit like sudden sunlight. The facility had agreed to an independent evaluation of Rafi, under pressure from Mika's legal petition and the public scrutiny Noah's series created. Noah drove to Willowgate with her heart pounding, not sure what she would find. Rafi sat in a pale room wearing a loose sweater, his eyes dull from medication, his beard untrimmed. When he saw Noah, something flickered. You're from the plant, he said slowly, like pulling a word out of mud. Noah swallowed. Keiko's, she said. Rafi's gaze sharpened with pain. Keiko is gone, he whispered, and then his face folded. Noah wanted to apologize for existing. Instead, she leaned forward and said the only honest thing. Mika is alive, and she's fighting. The evaluation took time, because truth often moves at the speed of paperwork. But once a competent psychiatrist replaced Willowgate's paid voices, the narrative of instability began to crumble. Rafi had not been delusional. He had been terrified and then chemically suppressed. He told the investigators what he knew in a voice that shook with rage. Vale Meridian had offered Keiko a buyout far below value, then escalated when she refused. After the inspections and fines, Someone tampered with the plant's electrical panels during a safety upgrade. Rafi had confronted Garrick at a meeting, had threatened to go public with documents showing bribery and forged reports. He smiled at me, Rafi said, staring at the table as if seeing the smile there. He said I would be taken care of. Rafi remembered the night he was grabbed outside his apartment, shoved into a van, told he was having a mental breakdown. He had woken up in Willowgate with his own signature on forms he had never seen. The investigators listened, faces hardening. When Noah left the interview room, she found Mika waiting in the hall, older than the last time they had met, her posture stiff with determination. The girl ran to Rafi and hugged him with a fierceness that made Noah's throat burn. Rafi's arms wrapped around his daughter slowly, as if he was afraid she might dissolve. Noah stepped back, giving them space, and felt something in her chest loosen. The ledger was not settled, but it had finally been opened to the right page. The arrests did not happen in a burst of heroic music. They happened in ordinary clothes on ordinary mornings. A city inspector was taken from his driveway while holding a travel mug. A council aide was escorted out of an office building with a jacket over his head. Garrick Vale was arrested at a ribbon-cutting ceremony, surrounded by cameras he had assumed would worship him. Noah watched the footage on her laptop. Hands clasped so tightly her knuckles whitened. Commentators argued about corruption and development. Strangers debated whether the fire proved anything. Noah knew that proof was not an emotion. It was a chain, and she had helped forge links. When the prosecution announced charges connected to arson, bribery, coercion, and unlawful confinement, Noah felt tears rise. Not triumphant tears, but exhausted ones. She thought of Keiko's soup on a table. She thought of Sable's breath in the dark. She thought of Lyle's shaking hands and Darnell's guilt and Mika's blunt courage. None of it could be repaid in a courtroom. Still, a verdict was a kind of public memory, a way of saying, we saw this, and we will not call it nothing. During the trial, Vale Meridian's lawyers tried to smear Noah. They called her a profiteer, a social media opportunist. The judge shut down the worst of it, but the attempt still felt like a hand reaching for her throat. Noah testified anyway, calm and precise, using timestamps and files and logs. She answered questions without flair. She refused to let the story become a spectacle again. When Garrick's recording played in court, his voice saying, "Righteous people are flammable," a ripple moved through the room like a shiver. Garrick sat very still, eyes forward, as if still trying to will the world into obeying him. For the first time, his confidence looked like denial. Afterward, there was no magical peace. Noah returned to her apartment and found the same radiator clicking, the same dishes in the sink, the same quiet that arrived when adrenaline finally left. Her phone buzzed with messages from strangers calling her brave, calling her a hero, calling her a symbol. The words felt too large. She had not been brave because she liked bravery. She had been brave because guilt had refused to let her sleep. She visited Lyle and brought groceries, and he cried into his hands like a child. She met Darnell for coffee and watched him finally unclench a decade of fear. She sat with Rafi and Mika at a small diner, where Mika ate fries with the intensity of someone proving she still had a future. Rafi looked older, but his eyes had regained their edge. Keiko would have hated the attention, he said, and Mika snorted. She would have pretended to hate it, Mika corrected, and then used it to fix 3 more problems. Noah laughed softly, the sound surprising her. At the end of the meal, Mika slid a folded piece of paper across the table. It was a list, written in neat block letters. Scholarships for workers' kids. Legal fund for whistleblowers. Memorial garden on the old plant land. Mika's pen had underlined the last item twice. Mom wanted the plant to be a place people didn't get thrown away, Mika said. If the building is gone, we can still do that. Noah touched the paper with her gloved hand. I can help, she said. And this time the offer felt simple rather than desperate. They formed a foundation, with the money recovered through settlements and fines. It was not justice in the poetic sense, but it was material. Tuition payments, therapy sessions, safety training, legal representation for people who could not afford to be heard. Noah donated her time, her platform, and a percentage of Quiet Ledger's profits. She also did something that would have made her younger self panic. She allowed herself to accept help without measuring it for moral purity. Drina teased her gently for it. Look at you, Drina said, leaning in her office doorway. Learning that receiving doesn't make you corrupt. Noah rolled her eyes, but she smiled. On the anniversary of the fire, they held a small ceremony at the empty lot where Aurora once stood. The land had been seized and frozen during the investigation, now a scar surrounded by construction fences. Someone had left paper cranes on the fence, their wings trembling in the harbor wind. Mika stood with a bouquet of wildflowers and a face made of stone. Rafi held her shoulder. Lyle stood a little apart, hat in hand. Noah did not give a speech. She simply placed a jar of sea glass at the fence. Pieces smoothed by waves, broken things made gentle by time. I used to think I owed her money, Noah said quietly. Voice meant for herself as much as anyone. Now I think I owe her a world that doesn't punish people for being decent. Mika glanced at her, eyes sharp. Then we build it, she said, as if the idea were obvious. Noah nodded, because perhaps it was. That night, Noah walked to the waterfront alone. The harbor lights reflected in the water like scattered coins, and she felt the old reflex to count them, to calculate what they could buy, to bargain with the sky. Instead, she listened to the sounds. The distant foghorn, the slap of small waves, the murmur of traffic. Her hearing in her left ear had never fully recovered. The world on that side was softer, blurred. For years she had treated the softness as loss. Now she realized it had also taught her focus. She could not hear everything, so she learned to hear what mattered. She pulled out her phone and opened a message draft to Sable, a habit she had never deleted. She typed, "Auntie, I didn't fix everything, but I stopped pretending that silence is the same as peace." She stared at the words and then, instead of sending them to a number that no longer existed, she saved them. The act felt like placing a stone on a grave. Small, meaningful, not enough, still necessary. Behind her, the city kept building, arguing, forgetting, remembering. Ahead of her, the water kept moving, insisting that nothing stayed sharp forever, not even broken glass. Noah took off her glove and flexed her scarred hand in the salt air. The skin pulled, but it held. She breathed in, tasting the harbor. And for the first time in a long time, she did not feel like she was living on borrowed time. She felt like she had chosen to live on purpose. Noah eventually met Mika in a supervised room painted the color of diluted peaches. Social services allowed it because Noah could demonstrate a long-term connection to Keiko, and because Drina had filed documents showing Noah was not seeking custody or money. Mika arrived with a foster mother who looked exhausted, and the girl's posture screamed readiness for disappointment. She stared at Noah's glove, and then at Noah's eyes, as if comparing both to an internal photograph. "You knew her," Mika said. Not a question. Noah nodded. "She hired me," Noah answered, which was true but incomplete. Mika's mouth tightened. "People keep telling me she was difficult," she said. "Like that explains why she's dead." Noah did not defend Keiko with adjectives. She offered stories. She described Keiko kneeling to pick up a dropped bolt, Keiko stopping a line because one worker looked dizzy, Keiko buying replacement boots for a temp who had shown up in torn sneakers. Mika listened with fierce stillness. And when her eyes finally wet, she looked angry at the tears as if they were traitors. "If she was like that," she whispered, "then why didn't anyone save her?" Noah wanted to say that she had tried, that she had been young and poor and in pain and afraid, but excuses sounded like perfume in a fire. "I don't know," Noah said. "I'm here because I can't live with that question either." In the weeks that followed, Mika texted in short bursts. Random facts, sudden fears, a photo of a math worksheet with a frustrated caption. Noah answered every message, even when she was tired, even when the conversation was awkward. Trust, she learned, was built the way captions were built, one honest line at a time. On a Saturday, Mika asked, "Did you ever want to disappear?" Noah stared at the screen for a long time. She remembered standing in the clinic parking lot after Sable's funeral, staring at her damaged hand and thinking that maybe the world would be kinder if she left it alone. She typed, "Yes," then added, "But disappearing doesn't erase the bill. It only shifts it onto someone else." Mika sent back, "That's a gross metaphor." And then almost immediately, "Thanks." The backlash did not stop with comments. One afternoon, Noah returned from the post office to find a cheap bouquet on her doorstep, the kind sold near gas stations, the plastic wrap crinkling like a warning. There was no card, but the stems were taped around a printed screenshot of her apartment building from an online listing site, circled in red. Her stomach dropped into cold clarity. She called the police, filed a report, and knew, with a calm that scared her, that the system would not protect her quickly enough. That night, she and Drina went through every privacy setting, every public record database, every old account that might leak a location. Noah also moved her spare key off her keyring and into a coded lockbox, because fear had taught her to think like a thief. When someone tried her door at 3:12 a.m., the knob turning once, then twice, her cameras caught only a hooded outline, and the footsteps ran before the motion light could bloom fully. In the morning, she did not post the footage for sympathy. She sent it directly to the investigators. The line between online drama and physical danger had been crossed, and she refused to pretend otherwise. During the lull between legal filings, Noah went to the coastal town where Sable had grown up. She found it on an old postcard tucked inside Sable's recipe book. The ink faded, but the handwriting stubborn. The town was small, smelling of pine and salt, and the clinic where Sable once worked as a night janitor still stood with a new coat of paint. An elderly receptionist recognized the name and softened. "Sable Rains," she repeated. That woman could outwork a storm. She invited Noah into a back room and produced a battered folder. Inside was a photograph. Sable, much younger, standing beside a school bus, her arm around a child with messy hair and a defiant chin. Noah's breath caught. The child was Noah. She had no memory of the picture, but her body recognized the posture of safety. "She used to say you were her second chance," the receptionist said. Noah swallowed hard. She had spent years believing she owed Sable a debt that could never be repaid. Seeing the photo, she realized Sable had been paying her own debt too, paying it forward with stubborn love. Outside, the ocean rolled like a slow exhale, and Noah let herself cry without bargaining. When the case finally reached court, Noah was called not as a victim but as a witness with unusual evidence. She sat in a wooden chair under fluorescent lights and answered questions that tried to turn her into an unreliable narrator. The defense attorney held up her social media following like it was a weapon. "You monetize attention," he said. "Isn't it true you benefit from this spectacle?" Noah breathed once, then answered evenly. "I monetize accessibility," she said. "I caption the world for people who are locked out of it. This is not a spectacle to me. It's a ledger. People died, and the numbers didn't add up." The judge told the attorney to move on. In the hallway afterward, Mika waited with a foster mother and a small paper cup of water. "You were terrifying,"